Welcome back to the Zoomer. We're down to our last couple of minutes here, and so we thought we'd open the floor to our audience for some of their questions on this heated discussion. The first from Anne. Anne, welcome to the roundtable.
Why is medical assistance in dying pushed on Canadians when most Canadians don't even have proper palliative care or access to mental health support?
You're right. My argument for 30 years has been, before we talk about dying with dignity, we need to talk about living with dignity and the things we need to make it. I think only 70% of our population has access to palliative care. 35% has hospice, does not have hospice. In Ontario, a hospice has to raise 50% of its operating fees because the government doesn't want to pay more. So the answer is, the answer is that what we need to do is focus on what is needed. Now as cost before we focus on basically medical termination. And we're not talking about assistance in dying, we're talking about termination, what the Dutch call medical termination. So let's talk about living with the care we need.
Excellent question, but I'll take it back to the individual again. Why should this person suffer until you get in all the resources necessary to deal with that person?
Because when we deal with that, we will not get anything fixed. When we deal with the societal, and we use you as an example, we get the care. But as soon as we start taking that away, it is easy to neglect what we need to do as a society. And that is our obligation in medicine, but that should be our obligation as citizens. And that should be what, as citizens, we are pushing for in writing to our legislature and standing up as you have. Merci beaucoup.
I just want to pick up on the mental health. Thank you for raising that. I mean, I work with people who are seriously mentally ill and across the criminal justice system. Just to give you a window, ODSP in this province supports people on disability to 60% of the poverty line. Supported housing, there is an 8 to 10 year waiting list to get supported housing in this town. And the waiting time to get on an assertive community treatment team for the people with most serious mental health problems, 1 year. So we expect people who have the most severe and most troubled problems to survive for up to a year, and 60% of the poverty line still waiting 8 years for their housing to come through. And we don't get the socio-demographic determinants of health that's going on here. That is where our attention should be lying, and to think we have the wisdom to weigh into saying, yeah, we agree you should die, or maybe you should suffer on. The history of our society over the last 100 years doesn't show that we take on the decisions of life or death over people with great wisdom.
Okay, I want to bring Helen in on this, and then final word to you.
I think also important to note that 88% of those who had MAiD had palliative care or access to palliative care. The recommendations from the Special Joint Committee include several around palliative care, including for increased funding. So I think it's incumbent on us as individuals and a society to talk to the government and to ask for those increased resources, and to remember that at the end of the day, an individual has to ask for MAiD. I don't think anyone is being forced to have MAiD.
Anne, you've provoked quite a conversation. Thank you. All right, welcome to the roundtable. What's your name?
My first name's Les, last name's Zavashuk.
Welcome. What's your question?
Thank you. I'd like to thank the panel for sharing both the philosophical sides of this discussion. But as I'm sitting in the audience, one thing I kept missing, I kept wanting to hear something about the quality of life. And I understand if you're sitting there with the teddy bear all day, I understand if you're knitting all day. But if you're the person that's laying in that bed, that you hope the PST comes more than once every 8 hours to change you, if you can't eat the food, or the food that's there, you don't know what it is, people are showing up and you don't know who they are, that's no longer quality of life. And if anyone is in the audience like me, I've often thought, you know what, if I'm ever in this condition, I hope someone kills me. As harsh as it sounds, but I think many of us has been there. So how now does that all play into this?
I helped take care of a woman with advanced MS who was asking the same question. She spoke in a whisper. She was on a feeding tube. And when she would go to the hospital, she wanted to die, she'd go to the hospital, being taken there for aspiration pneumonia. She would say, take care of me, save me, help me. And the answer is, at any of these points, what we think of as unacceptable, those people in crisis may say, yes, I want this. And we also know with very late stroke, patients, there is something going on in their brains. Some people say it's great, some people isn't. Should we not err on the side of caution rather than on the side of termination? And we don't know much about what is happening in that late stage, mentally or physically. We know that in dementia, many people through stage 6 will have good feelings and will have good days. So we don't know enough at that point to say. We do know that in crisis, many of these people will come to say, give me another day. You're not going to make Easter, but you might make Christmas.
I'll give you a case, a real case. I like coming back to real people.
Me too.
Not hypotheticals. I was brought in to witness, because we used to do this, to witness a request for MAiD. Now, the person I was coming in to see was a man with MS. He'd been confined to his sister's home for a number of years. He was living in a room in his sister's home. He had windows all around. He could see all kinds of stuff. He wanted to get MAiD because to feed him, somebody, his sister in many cases, had to insert the feeding tube. The sister had to prepare the food and then grind it all up to go down the feeding tube. He couldn't communicate. He could hear, he could listen, he could think. To get a response from him, I was told, when he blinks once, it's no. If he blinks twice, it's yes. And here's this man, completely incontinent, lying in the bed, being fed through the feeding tube, and you're talking about a quality of life? Guess what he's going to blink to you?
Well, I hope it won't be 3 times.
All right. We'll have to leave it there.
Sorry. Okay.
Les, thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is it for us this evening. We hope we've given you something to reflect upon. Whatever your thoughts, we are always open to comments. To get in touch, send us an email at comments@thezoomer.com. Thank you to my panel and for you at home watching. We'll see you soon. For now, it's time to zoom out.